HQ in Nashville, Tennessee, to wherever you're cheering on your Tennessee Titans. The So Bros Network presents the Unofficial Titans Podcast.
Welcome back for another episode of the Unofficial Titans Podcast. Folks, it is here. The annual off-season content plan has returned for 2024. We are kicking off the series yet again with a look at one of the rivalries that the Tennessee Titans happen to find themselves in. This time, this year, for the first time, we are talking about a division rival. We're talking about the Jacksonville Jaguars. Of course, I'm your host for the Unofficial Titans Podcast, the EIC at SoBrosNetwork.com. You know I got that mind right, that ass tight. It's Big Natural Stoney Keeley. You can follow me on Twitter at Stoney Keeley. Collectively, we are at SoBros Network on all major social media platforms. Joined, as usual, by my co-host for the Unofficial Titans Podcast. He is One Take-O, Cinderella Man, coming to us from the dad zone, outspoken Owen Reed. Owen, how you doing today, my man?
Hey, everybody. Hey, Stoney. I'm doing great. We're starting to get into the summertime, and while there's a break in football, you know, that just means a lot of fun off-season content for us.
Yeah, for sure, for sure. So we've talked about the Buffalo Bills, we've talked about the Baltimore Ravens, but things kind of take on a different meaning whenever you get into the division. And I chose this offseason in particular to start tackling the division rivals because of the way each of the last two seasons has ended, with winner-take-all games against the Jacksonville Jaguars, in essence. But what is it like? I don't know if it's. I feel like the Jags rivalry is the most personal of the division rivals because, I mean, you're starting to see some fire with the Houston Texans because of the uniform, the Oilers uniforms. But that's a pretty cut and dry thing for me. Like I really don't see why Texans fans whine so much about the Houston Oilers uniforms when the Titans were wearing them back in the 2000s. And we didn't hear a peep out of them then. I don't know if it's just because there weren't any Texans fans back then, or if now that the team's good, they want to wear good uniforms. I don't know, but it's been pretty cut and dry that the Titans own the uniforms, and that's just that. So as far as like on the field stuff and between the fan bases, I kind of feel like the Titans and Jags has been the more personal rivalry. Do you think that's fair to say, or are you looking at another AFC South team as the Titans' most heated rival?
No, I'm with you there. I think it's interesting because they both were expansion teams around the same time, or not as much expansion teams, but
they relocated and
sure.
Yeah,
around the same time in the same division. And it's fairly competitive. Do you have the overall ratings back and forth? What that record is? Like
the rivalry's win-loss? I don't, but
yes.
I think I can pull that up really quick. But
I looked it up today, and it was 35-25 Titans, which isn't lopsided by any means.
Yeah, that's actually a little more lopsided than I expected. I thought it was going to be a lot tighter than that. But yeah.
And, like you were saying, it's something more personal there. I feel like there was a long streak where the Colts maybe had a grip on the AFC South to where a point where there wasn't really a rivalry within them.
Yeah.
So the rivalry kind of felt back to us.
Yeah. And also with these teams, man, you mentioned it. With the Houston Oilers relocating to Nashville, becoming the Tennessee Titans, the Jacksonville Jaguars and the Houston Texans are both expansion teams. And then you have the Indianapolis Colts. Like these are teams that are small market teams that don't have the history of the Dallas Cowboys and the Philadelphia Eagles and the Pittsburgh Steelers and the Cleveland Browns and the Raiders and the Chiefs. Like, you're talking about a decades-long head start for some of these more storied programs, and the AFC South kind of feels like a division of newer teams, smaller market teams, teams that kind of have the chip on the shoulder, and outside of the Peyton Manning Indianapolis Colts, maybe the Andrew Luck Indianapolis Colts there for a few years, outside of those teams, it doesn't feel like this is a division loaded with primetime teams that casual football fans really want to know about. And I think that's an interesting aspect of this rivalry too, that kind of, I don't know, it breeds, like, these fan bases have chips on their shoulders. And there are some nasty Jags fans, just like there are some nasty Titans fans, but it kind of feels like you have two franchises that almost have that little brother syndrome in the grand scheme of the NFL. And when they turn their attention on one another, it just feels like the fan interaction is even more personal and a little more intense than some of the other rivalries that the Titans are in.
No, I'm fully with you on that. Yeah, little brother syndrome is a good way to put it. There's been times when the Titans and Jags have both felt these highs, and boy howdy, when they crash and burn spectacularly.
Yeah, it's kind of weird looking at the history, the trajectory of these two teams, because they were kind of good at the same time, and then they were bad at the same time, and then they were good at the same time again, and now they're bad, they're middling at the same time now. It's kind of funny how the two paths just seem to follow one another, whereas it almost feels like the instances where the Titans and Colts have been good at the same time have been rare, where the Titans and Texans have been good at the same time has been rare as well. But the Jags and the Titans just seem to find one another, and I think that's really interesting. But comparing the two cities, would you rather live in Nashville, Tennessee, or Jacksonville, Florida, Owen?
Oh, it's Nashville by 1,000 miles. Jacksonville's kind of in the middle of nowhere. It's in that lawless swamp part of Florida, not the fun touristy part. And Nashville, for all its problems, at least you could say it's in the middle of a society.
Yeah, man. I don't know how much time you've spent in Jacksonville, but I've got a really dark, creepy Jacksonville story, because my wife and I were heading down to Treasure Island. It's a little island outside of St. Petersburg, Tampa, St. Pete area. Family friend lives down there, so we were going to visit and meet up with the father-in-law. And we decided we were going to make a little road trip out of it, go stay a night in Panama City Beach, go over to St. Augustine, stay a night there, and then make our way on down to the Tampa St. Pete area. Well, when we were driving from Panama City Beach to St. Augustine, we realized that Jacksonville, we had to drive through Jacksonville, and I had never been before, so I kind of thought, hey, let's cross this city off of our list. Let's go scope it out and see what it's all about. And man, it was, it's a random weekday. Downtown Jacksonville, there was hardly any traffic. There was hardly any people out on the roads. It just kind of felt like a ghost town. It was a very, very sad experience. And then I'm Googling, like, where do people go in Jacksonville? And I don't remember the name of it, but there's a big mall right on the river. And we pull up to the parking garage. This mall's next to some sort of bar and grill that seemed pretty lively. So we're like, okay, cool. Well, this is a spot we can check out. And so we walk in the mall and realize, okay, it is just the bar that is lively, because this place is dead. And we're just scoping it out, walking from store to store. And we go in one of the stores, and we come out, and I notice a guy behind us way off in the distance, and he's just kind of like slowly following along. And then we go into another store, and we come out, and he's still there, the same distance, almost as if he had stopped where he was at when we walked into the store. But then when we start walking again, he starts walking with us. And we go into another store, and we come out, and suddenly there's two more guys with this guy, and they're walking, behind us in the same direction as us. And at that point, I'm like, this is fucking weird, man. Like, I don't like this. I still hadn't really alerted my wife to it, because I didn't know how she would respond to it, if it would be like, oh, scream and run or, call the police or something like that. So I'm just like keeping an eye on these guys, which I always tell people, if you're in a city you're not familiar with, keep your head on a swivel. Pay attention to who's around you and what's going on around you. And so I tell her, I'm like, hey, let's dip out of here. This place sucks anyways. We're not going to go to this bar and grill where everybody's at. Like, let's just get the fuck out of here because this city just sucks. And so we go out and we're walking along the riverfront, and sure enough, man, I see the mall door open and these three dudes come walking out, looking around, and they're tailing us. At this point, I know, I'm like, oh man, these people are following us. This is weird as shit. So I grab her and like just dip behind one of the support beams holding up the parking garage. A bus comes by. We cross the street. We lose these guys. I don't see them again. We get in the car and we get the fuck out of Jacksonville, Florida. And I don't care to ever go back to that city again. So that's my Jacksonville story. I don't know if you have a Jacksonville story or if you've spent much time there yourself.
No, man, it sounds like you almost became a statistic.
Yeah.
No, anytime I've had to go through Jacksonville is just driving, and I tried to get through it as quick as possible. It's definitely just in that middle part of Florida where nothing's really happening but trouble.
Yeah. And then, so we get out of town, and I forgot about this part, and then we realize, like, oh shit, we're low on gas. We need to stop somewhere. And we stop at this like sketch-ass looking place that's next to a strip club. And I'm just like, man, we are striking out. We are striking out in Jacksonville. And come to find out, I talked to a buddy later on who's familiar with the area, and I'm retelling this story. And he's like, yeah, dude, you picked like the absolute worst part of Jacksonville to get off and get gas at. And I'm like, cool. He's like, you're kind of like lucky nothing happened to you over the course of this trip. I'm like, well, shit, man, what do you do in this city? He's like, you don't go downtown, that's for sure. So lesson learned there. But when I say the Jacksonville Jaguars, Owen, what comes to mind right away for you?
Oh, man, just a plain sense of hate.
Yeah.
I just overall don't like them. I don't like them when they're losers. I really don't like them when they're winners.
It's tough to swallow when the Jags are good, because I think we've been conditioned for the Colts being good for quite some time. And the Houston Texans, like, they've had their moments as well. They had their stranglehold on the division there for a little bit, but it's kind of like everybody takes their turn atop the AFC South. But when the Jags are on top, man, I don't know. And I think, honestly, it's just because of the fan base. Like, I just feel like Jags fans are particularly out of touch, particularly whiny. When it comes to the Titans, I don't want to insult people just on this show, but it does kind of feel like there's a little bit of extra venom behind the Jags fans. So when they get a chance to puff their chest out as the kings of the AFC South, it does make it a little bit harder to swallow. And I think that's kind of what comes to mind for me, is just the outright hate between the fan bases. Is there a particular Jags player that comes to mind before any other?
That's a great question. David Gerard. I don't know. Fred Taylor.
I was going to go with Maurice Jones-Drew.
Ooh, that's a good one.
For some reason, thinking about the quarterbacks, I go to David Gerard too, because he was awesome, man. And, not a highly touted prospect coming out of college, but kind of went in there and won the job and was a tough player. The team kind of took on his personality, and they had a couple playoff runs with him at the helm. I think of Blake Bortles too, because that was a fun experiment there for a few years. And Blake Bortles even got the Jags to an AFC championship game, but ultimately fizzled out. And the team's turmoil at quarterback over that era. Again, we talk about how, the Titans kind of go through like similar trajectory to the Jags. And this is when like both teams were coming off of the Jake Locker, Blaine Gabbert duo. They both drafted quarterbacks in 2011 that ultimately led to them drafting another quarterback. And the Jags go with Blake Bortles. The Titans had Marcus Mariota. just kind of interesting to kind of document how those things happen. But taking a look back, well, no, I did want to ask you, because we kind of talked about how the performance on the field, we've danced around the question that I'm going to ask you. It's almost like the performance on the field doesn't really matter when it comes to these two teams. Is this the one rivalry in the division that you feel is just personal, no matter if the teams are good or not?
Oh, absolutely. Just because there's been, like you said, it's not the longest, strongest history, but there's been enough time passed to where we could say there's, a couple decades worth of history. So we can remember a time when maybe the Jags whooped on us, or the Jags can remember a time when we whooped on them. So every time I think you come into it with a personal feeling.
So we talked about it a little bit before. These are two smaller market teams in the early days trying to find their footing in new markets. I mean, Jacksonville is an expansion team. We talked about the Houston Oilers relocating to Nashville. The Oilers were actually the Jags' first regular season opponent in 1995. The Oilers won that game 10-3, but those first few years, man, it really did kind of feel like, I called it little brother syndrome, but it was kind of two fan bases, two markets kind of clamoring to, find their place in the grand lore of the NFL. How much do you think those early years of just being new and trying to find yourself as a fan base contributed to the mentality that Titans fans have today?
Yeah, absolutely. First of all, 10-3 sounds like a real barn burner of a game.
One touchdown. Yeah.
One touchdown, that's all you get. But yeah, just like you said, two teams searching for an identity, destined to play each other over and over again.
Yeah.
It's kind of big to start off right.
Yeah, I think every good rivalry begins with two chips on two sets of shoulders, and it kind of felt like the Titans went through all that, the relocation, Bud Adams moving the team, basically telling the city of Houston, if you don't want us, we're getting the hell out of here. And then you had the season in Memphis. They played games at Vanderbilt Stadium. And finally, by the time we get into what is now called Nissan Stadium, the place is rocking, and it takes a little bit to get there. And for the Jags on the field, pretty successful right away, but like, you don't ever think, when you're thinking about the late 90s, you don't ever think about those Jags teams, right? It's kind of crazy, and I think that's an example of why the fan bases would have chips on their shoulders. And I think it's something that to this day, it translates, like, generationally. It's something that's been passed down from generation to generation, along with these two teams going on such similar trajectories. Now, it didn't take too long. There some, like the Houston Texans, it took them quite a while before they were really ramped up and competitive, with Matt Schaub and Andre Johnson and Arian Foster and back in those days. But for the Titans relocating to Nashville and for the Jags as an expansion team, it was only a few years that you're talking about two of the best records in the AFC. The 99 season was particularly special. And you think about that being the year that the Titans go to the Super Bowl. They come up 1 yard short to the St. Louis Rams. The Music City Miracle happens against the Buffalo Bills during that postseason. But if you look at specifically the matchups between the Titans and the Jags, 20-19 in Jacksonville in favor of the Titans, 41-14 in favor of the Titans in Nashville, and then being down 14-10 at halftime, the Titans rally to score 23 unanswered to win 33-14 in Jacksonville in the AFC Championship game. The Jags, Owen, I don't know if you're aware of this, the Jags finished that season with a record of 15-3. 15-3. All three of their losses came to the Tennessee Titans. So that, to me, when you talk about competitiveness, on the field results, that sort of thing, that season, that 99 season where the Titans were the only team to beat the Jacksonville Jaguars, and they did it 3 fucking times, is the first thing that comes to mind for me When you're looking at this rivalry, do you still feel like that 99 season is the ultimate trump card? Does Jacksonville have anything on Tennessee that even remotely comes close to that season?
Man, I don't know. Not that I can think of off the top of my head, just because that level is just so personal. You know, if the Titans aren't in the picture there, Jacksonville could be in Jacksonville would be in the Super Bowl.
For sure.
Not could be, but and you know, that could have gone entirely different. Who knows? But yeah, just to stick it to them 3 times and nobody else could touch you, that's pretty impressive.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's one of those things that probably enhanced the bitter feelings. It's probably one of the earliest moments in the rivalry that really enhanced the bitter feelings from Jags fans towards Titans fans, because that team probably could have won the Super Bowl. That team probably could have beat the Rams that year, maybe, and who knows what the trajectory of the course of the entire NFL might have been changed. But if not for the Titans, the one hump that the Jags couldn't get over that season. But they would kind of come back down to the pack along with the Titans after the era of Steve and Eddie. Neither could really get over the hump in the mid-2000s. The Titans had a couple of really bad teams in there, as did the Jags. But when you look at how these teams were built in the mid-2000s, you think of the names like we've already mentioned with Fred Taylor, Maurice Jones-Drew. Then you have Titans players like Travis Henry, Lindell White, Chris Johnson. Both of these teams having really good defenses. How much of the rivalry do you think from that point is kind of enhanced between the fan bases by the fact that these two teams played such a similar style during this time?
Yeah, it was really similar. It was a really big struggle, I think, for the most part in those years, the late 2000s and early 2010s. It was really cool to watch, like Chris Johnson go back and forth with Maurice Jones-Drew, even though, you know, nothing much was happening else in those games. Like, you know, you had 2 star running backs that were really going head-to-head. So, yeah, I would say a very similar style.
Similar style, and I think the angle you can take off of that as a fan is it gives you a direct comparison. Because if you're both playing the same style, one can look at the other and say, we do it better. And I think that is something that kind of added a little spice to the rivalry, added a little flavor. These were 2 bad teams for the most part during the 2010s. I particularly remember the honey mustard color rush uniforms that the Jags wore on Thursday night uniform against the powder blues, the baby blues, whatever it's fucking called, that the Titans wore. What do you think of those honey mustard Jags uniforms, Owen? Among the worst in the league's history?
Absolutely. Jacksonville's been through a lot of different interesting uniforms, and some of them were hit. But, yeah, that honey mustard was just gaudy, tacky, rough on the eyes.
What did you make of the mid-2010 seasons when they had that blended helmet that was like half black, half gold with the Jaguar logo on it?
Yeah, still not a fan of that either. Like I said, they went through a lot of interesting fashion choices. And, you know, sometimes, like when they got out there in the all black, like it looked incredible. But, yeah, there was a lot of misses along the way as well.
I know I said that they were both pretty bad teams throughout the 2010s. Later in the decade is when the Titans would hire Mike Vrabel and get things on course with back-to-back-to-back-to-back pretty good teams. But the 2017 season does stick out particularly because both teams were playoff teams. Both teams seem to be getting things right, heading in the right direction. The Titans make the playoffs as a wild card and actually upset the Kansas City Chiefs as an underdog. That was the game that Marcus Mariota throws the touchdown pass to himself. The Jags win the AFC South and make it to the AFC Championship game where they choke one to the New England Patriots, the Patriots who earned a berth in the title game by beating the Titans the week before. It's kind of interesting to think about this era of the Titans-Jags rivalry because it was almost like the byproduct of all of those bad years finally like turning some things around and luck going their way. But there's no way that the Titans would have beaten the Patriots that year. And I mean, you're talking about this was still when the Patriots were the New England Patriots. And it took Blake Bortles had a hell of a game in the title game, but it did take some more Patriots heroics for them to come back and win that game. But I'm just curious, your thoughts, Owen. Let's just play devil's advocate here, complete hypothetical, and say the Titans do beat the Patriots that year, and we get another Titans-Jags AFC Championship game. Do you think that was an opportunity for the Titans that slipped through their fingertips? Could they have beaten the Jags that year?
I mean, it's entirely possible. I don't know. Jacksonville seemed like they were really hot that year. That was just like kind of their big year. So I don't know. I couldn't say confidently that it would have gone their way.
I'm
I think
kind of with you.
I think that was kind of Jacksonville's year in the AFC South. But like you said, that was prime Brady. Nothing was getting in the way of him. They demolished us, right?
Yeah, it was a pretty bad game. I mean, the Titans came out on the opening drive, and I think they hit Corey Davis to go up 7-0, and it kind of looked like, oh man, who are these feisty upstart Titans going to come in here and do something? But then the Patriots just turned it on and just annihilated the Titans. But yeah, I do think Jacksonville should have won the AFC Championship game. I mean, they should have gone to the Super Bowl. The team was that good. They were capable of getting there, and it was just a choke job and prime, Tom Brady heroics that swung it the other way. I look at those two rosters, and it's fun to play what if, because it definitely adds a layer to this rivalry if they meet in the 2017 AFC Championship game. But I kind of feel like the Jags would have. I don't think the Jags would have choked that game away. I'll just put it that way. But still fun to kind of look back at. But it does get us to the modern era of this rivalry. And I do want to relive how the season concluded for the Titans each of the past two seasons. 2022 Josh Dobbs game, the controversial Josh Allen scoop and score touchdown that kept the Titans from miraculously still somehow winning the division despite the rash of injuries they had, and just how bad that roster turned down the stretch in 2022. Do you hold this one against the Jags, Owen, or do you think that they might have spared the Titans an embarrassing playoff loss there?
Yeah, I remember not going into that game with a ton of optimism. We were like, hey, if we can make it to the playoffs, awesome. But we look really rough right now. I think Jacksonville just capitalized off of that.
Yeah. And then last year, Trevor Lawrence incomplete on 4th and 2. The Titans run out the clock, and they actually eliminate Jacksonville from the playoff race. So regardless of how you feel about the 2022 season, in that moment, did it feel pretty good to get a little bit of revenge, a little bit of payback a year later from the Jags doing it to the Titans?
I mean, absolutely. We were really bad last season, to be honest with you. So it was nice to end it on a high note of some sort.
Fair enough. So, I mean, where do you feel like this rivalry stands right now, with the window being open for Jacksonville for a couple of seasons, the window slamming shut on the Titans undergoing a regime change now? It kind of feels like this rivalry is at a point where it's like two ships passing in the night, and less of these teams are on the same level. But what do you think about where these two teams are right now and the health of this rivalry? Is it alive and well, or are they too far apart to be competitive right now?
I mean, I think if anything, it's as strong as ever. Those two season enders kind of prove it right there, that even if they're not up to par, that this game is going to be played intensely.
Yeah, it really is interesting, because they've been games between two middling to bad teams each of the last season finales, and yet like nobody outside of Nashville or Jacksonville seems to really care about these games. But for the fan bases themselves, none of that matters, man. Like it is heart and soul. And so I think the rivalry between the two fan bases is incredibly healthy, alive and well. But I will be interested to see what the games look like this season, because I think there's a chance the Titans could be better than people think they are going to be, and I think there's a chance the Jags could be a lot worse than people think they're going to be. So I don't know if we're going to get another of those situations where the late season games matter all that much. Like I said, it kind of feels like these are franchises heading in opposite directions right now. The Titans got another big win over Jacksonville this offseason when they lured Calvin Ridley away from Jacksonville, who has openly stated he wanted to stay in Jacksonville, and chose the Titans because of a conversation he had with Rand Carthon. And now, Calvin Ridley is closer to his wife's family in Huntsville. He's making plenty of money. Ain't no doubt about that. And seems to be a really good fit with the Titans so far. How big of a win do you think it was for the Titans to get him away from Jacksonville? And does that add another layer to this rivalry as well?
Yeah, I think anytime that you could steal a high-profile player away from a division rival, it's big.
Yeah.
The people that want to go against it will say that we overpaid, but I think that's just kind of how the market is now. That if you get a high-profile wide receiver, you're going to end up paying for him big time.
For sure.
If you don't find him in the draft, that's just the cost of it. But I think that's really big. I think it'll definitely add some more heat to that those two games in December.
Yeah. Do you have any favorite moments from this rivalry? Like, immediately, the first thing that comes to mind is Derrick Henry's 99-yard touchdown run. But then I also think about Marcus Mariota's stiff arm of Barry Church. And I'm sure I'm missing a ton of moments from this rivalry, but those are the first two things that pop into my head. What about yours?
Yeah, I mean, the Derrick Henry 99-yard run is, one of legends that
it's an
people
all-timer.
Still talk about. I think that, if you ever get the chance to go back and watch that AFC Championship game that they had in the 99-2000 season, that was big and a lot of fun to watch.
For sure. So that's it. We've reached the end of my agenda. We've talked about this Titans-Jags rivalry in depth, but Owen, I'm going to ask you got any parting thoughts before we get on out of here?
I think I'm good to go. I'm excited to see how this year plays out. I'm with you. I think that maybe the early onset of how these two teams are going to be may not be entirely accurate, and I'm excited to see how it plays out this year.
Is Trevor Lawrence the guy for the Jacksonville Jaguars?
I mean, you sure hope he is.
If you're a
Jacksonville fan.
Yeah.
I think he's good, and I think initially having, Urban Meyer in there was just a really tough draw for him.
Ooh,
I think he's starting to look a little better and a little more polished under this new regime. And I don't know. I think he'll be interesting to watch.
Well, that's going to do it for us today. Owen, where can our listeners find you on social media?
I'm not publicly on social media,
Boom.
But if you like what I have to say, you can check out the Sobros. You can check out our Patreon for $5 a month. It's an easy $5. There's a lot of great content on there. Go check it out.
There you go. Well, he's outspoken Owen Reed. I'm Big Natural Stoney Keeley. Like the man said, SobrosNetwork.com, SobrosShop.com. Rate, review, subscribe to the Unofficial Titans Podcast, and don't miss an off-season content episode. We got 6, maybe 7 weeks of this. I got a 7th episode that's kind of hanging out there. We're going to have some special guests. We've got some fun topics planned for you, and we're going to be looking back at Titans history over the next several weeks here. So until next time, you stay classy, Titans fans.